So, it is hot as hell, and I'm out here playing around with turbos. So, my friend machined a hot side for me. So, just a little background on what I'm talking about here. So, the okay, a little background. So, the Audi, let's see, I don't even want to start this. The Audi Turbos back in the day for the 5 cylinders were K-Series turbo, made by KKK, which was eventually purchased and changed over to Borg-Warner. Now, in the early days, the early cars came with what's called a K24-7000 turbo. That is one of these guys. So this is the stock turbo. This was found on both the Audi S2, the Audi 200, and the Audi S4 and S6. This guy right here, that was the standard turbo that was equipped on all of those engines. With the whole RS2 thing where Porsche and Audi were working together, Porsche stepped it up. They installed what was called a K24-7200. And while it actually was more like a K26 turbo in a lot of ways, that's what its nomenclature was, and we'll leave it at that for now. K26 turbos came on the earlier 10-valve turbo 5 cylinders. They're a larger turbine, but they actually had a smaller compressor. At least most of them. The RS2 one did not, but we'll call that one a K24-7200 for now. In more recent years, so obviously Audi stopped those productions in '97. Basically, was the last time they used that turbo on their applications. They switched over to like the KO3s and the B5s, KO4s and the RS4, etc., etc. They Borg-Warner still continued to produce turbos. Now, in 2004, they released the S60R and the V70R, and it actually was an inline 5 turbo, and it actually came with a K-Series turbo. And it's kind of funny because they actually used what's called the K24-7400. A number of years back, there was a guy that was talking about it and mentioned that it looked really similar and was going to try it out, so I thought I'd jump on the bandwagon and do the same. So I was actually the first person who actually got it like dyno tuned and put on a Audi application. But it's a really cool turbo because again, this is the 7000. This is a stock turbo. The hot side's been removed, so you can see the turbine here. But the CHRA, so the center section right here, the Volvo Turbo uses an identical CHRA. Now, they use a larger exducer or larger turbine, and they use a much larger compressor and a much larger compressor housing. And those ones are rated from the factory at 300 horsepower, while all of the Audi stuff was kind of a, they were all rated at like 220, 224, whatever it was at the time. Nothing crazy. But yeah, so I like to swap on these Volvo turbos. I had a friend machine the hot side. So this is actually the stock K24 hot side. This is an RS2 exhaust manifold. This is the one that's going in the Titan car. And this is a stock, this is actually a K24 from this, 7000. It was machined out to fit the larger turbine. I haven't clocked the compressor housing yet. So I was clocking the CHRA so that it sits. So this is kind of what you can see though. You can see that literally we have the same style lines here. So that's the oil feed line, and this is the oil feed line, and they actually line up, and you can literally bolt this straight to it. The Volvo used hard lines for the water lines. This is the water inlet, and there's a little adapter, but you can take it out of your stock turbo and just literally put it right into this one, and then you have your coolant line. Same thing on the bottom. You have your drain. Your drain will line up right with the drain here. And also the coolant, actually technically this is the coolant feed down here, but it also lines up. So all of the lines actually line up. And then because I'm using the Audi version of the hot side, it all bolts up to the stock Audi manifolds. The Volvo Turbo used an internally wastegated hot side, and they were very, very well known for cracking. And like the one I got, this turbo that this came off a car, it has a huge nasty crack. Like, we'll put that picture up. But the great thing about that is it means that there's a ton of turbos out there with bad hot sides that nobody wants, because all the Volvo guys are replacing them because they're cracked actually, like through the wastegate housing, and so you're just basically bleeding off your turbo pressure the whole time. So it's great because I picked these up for normally around $150 shipped, and they're in really good condition other than the fact that the hot sides are cracked. And since I'm not even using the hot side, it's a complete and total win. Now, obviously, I need to clock this so this is pointed downward. The Volvo, so this is kind of a pre-runner to the EFR series turbo. They used what's called like the extended tip technology. And so you have this elongated and enlarged compressor housing, and then you also have the integrated diverter valve, just like you have on all the EFR series turbos. So normally what I do is there's a like block off plate here. This is actually V-banded, and you can have a little V-band adapter that just goes to a hose fitting. And then you need a larger inlet tube for your thing, but technically there's companies out there that make oversized ones so that it's kind of a bolt-up affair. So yeah, you run a block off plate here. You run the adapter here. You have to trim your hose a little bit because it's a little longer than whatever. I've seen people also just turn this down on a lathe, and so that this is they cut this out and make it so that it fits over a hose and so forth, or cut it and weld on a Audi style one. The Audi style one isn't much different. It's just made for a hose clamp, but yeah. It's pretty straightforward. And with this turbo at altitude, so in Utah we're at like 40-something thousand feet, depending on where you're at, up to 5,000, 6,000 feet if you're up in the mountains. I used this same turbo. I dynoed it the same day as 3 B7 RS4s, and at the time I was actually using a K26 hot side, which worked, but it wasn't a perfect profile against the actual, like, the blades on the turbine. So it was definitely letting some horsepowers by. But even with that, the car made, again, stock long block, same dyno day as 3 B7 RS4s, which are, 450 horsepower cars, the big V8s. So I had more horsepower than 2 stock ones. I was 12 horsepower short of a modified one that had all of the JHM stuff, exhaust cutout, deflapped intake manifold, everything except for the JHM supercharger basically he has on his car. And I was 12 short of his, but I actually made 100 wheel torque more than all of them. So it's a pretty torquey little turbo, and it's fun as hell. It basically, you can, any gear, you just push your foot down and it just spools, and that's one of the great things is it spools like the stock turbo. So like the stock turbo, starts to really get on it around 2,800 RPM. With the RS2 turbo, like they literally start kicking in around 4,000. With this turbo, it makes more horsepower than the RS2. But it kicks in like the stock turbo, so it's really nice, and it's a really good balance. So this is the one I like to run. I'll be getting a Motronic tune for it, so I can just run with stock Motronic everything. Again, because I'm using a stock hot side, you use stock downpipe, everything bolts straight up. It's a really, really clean, simple, tidy way to make good horsepower, and this is really kind of the limits of what you want to push on a stock long block. A lot of people, because this is a Volvo turbo and there's a lot of aftermarket support for Volvo over old Audis, they have billet wheels for these, so billet compressor wheels. They have oversized ones, they have regular sized ones, but with those you can actually make quite a significant amount of horsepower. There was a guy running E85 in his URS4. This turbo with the oversized I think it's the 6-blade or 6+6, I think they call it, compressor wheel on it. And he made, I don't remember the exact figure, but I know it was over 450 all-wheel horsepower, and I think equal torque. So it was pretty crazy for a stock frame turbo. It bolts up to a stock long block. You can use a stock downpipe and be making pretty serious horsepower for very, very little money. Again, these cost like 150 bucks. I think the wheels, the compressor wheels, are like 150 bucks. You know, if you're balancing it and doing that, you know, you're going to spend a little bit more depending on where you're located and who can balance and all that fun stuff. But super, super good option for people looking for a budget upgrade. The nice thing too, like, you know, I like Garrett turbos. I've ran Garrett turbos. In this application, though, you know, you're changing out all of your lines. So all of these feed lines, all of the return lines, everything has to be changed, swapped over. You know, you got to do all custom lines, and at the end of the day, you know, you spend $1,200 to $1,400 on a turbo. You spend another $300 on lines. You know, obviously you have to get the tune, injectors, everything else that you have to get also with this, but you're making very similar power for, you know, a few $100s versus those that would cost you significantly more just to get the turbo in your hands. So anyway, just wanted to talk about that. Okay, this is one of those random things that I like to do. So the brake lines I get, I usually get them from Apical, and they have, I think these are actually for like a Mark IV setup, but they're about the right length, and they're the same thread pitch and everything like that. So when I'm going with the big brake kits, this is normally what I run. Now, the factory has this bracket that sits on the back of the strut, and basically you have a hard line that goes from here to here for the brake line. Because I'm using this solid one-piece line, I don't have that go through anymore. It's not I don't use a short line to the hard line to another short line to the actual caliper. So I still try to use the factory bracket that bolts onto the back of the strut, but instead what I do is I kind of modify it. So like you can see, I cut out here, and I also cut out a chunk right here. What it does, like I said, with this Mark IV bracket or whatever it is, it's going to be hard to do and hold the camera. This is why I need a cameraman. Maybe I'll just hold it and I'll show you. Let's do that. All right, so let's try it this way. So, brake line comes in like this. What I like to do is I actually like to have this sitting right in here. Now, it's really tight. I might have to clearance it a little bit more, but I can push this in here, and that'll hold it firmly in place. And then I like to have this in here. But because this is kind of a crappy material, what I normally do is I cut a rubber hose line, fit it over there, fit this into place, and then I actually slide that in. So it actually makes it like a nice tight snug fit, but it also gives a nice barrier for that line. And then normally I'll put a zip tie or something on each side just to make sure it holds it there. But then it comes down to my brake caliper here, and then this line obviously goes up to the factory line here. And that way it holds onto the back of the strut just like the factory does. So it actuates and moves with the strut, keeps it out of the way of the tire, and keeps the brake line where it should be the whole time. So yeah, really easy to modify this, really easy to get something that'll work and to make it perform like factory while keeping it safe and out of the way of other things. So yep, we'll put this together. Might trim just a little bit more off of it. This one has like it, you can see how it has a recess there, and it actually, normally it'll just snug right in there. I might have to just grind just a little bit off this corner. It's actually about the same diameter once it sits in there, so it sits in there really, really nicely. And yeah, we're good to go. Okay, just thought I'd show the finished product. So yeah, you can see how it just snugly fits right in there and stays all in place. And this is pretty resilient as far as like where it goes, and you know, I'm pulling on it pretty good. It stays right where it needs to be, and you can still adjust where it's mounted on the line, so that you can get the proper setup to your brake. But yeah, pro tip. Okay, well, that's done. Got the turbo clocked, the new Volvo Turbo kind of situated. Got more of the suspension work done, some of the fine tuning, especially with like that brake line and getting that how it should look and make it look like a good, perfect fit. Hooked up the radiator, started filling that too. Didn't really, my other camera ran out of juice, so didn't catch a lot of that on tape, but we're still moving forward. And what else do we do? Yeah, the other wheel's on. We'll have to get everything like corner balanced and figured out. I want to get it down to the alignment shot and just make sure that everything's good to go and there's no problems anywhere. Then it's really going to be engine, transmission, pull, and swap everything out. That's where we want to get. So we're going to keep plugging away at this. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time.
Yo, the jam was fly. Oh my, now it's over. My batch of pals cut so Tajay must